everybody. I have the pleasure of being the speaker this morning, and I will give a little talk on water stress and water reuse and wastewater reuse in the Mediterranean area. As it's been just said, I come from the Water Research Institute of the National Research Council of Italy, where my group deals mostly on with wastewater treatment technologies and specifically on membrane filtration application to wastewater treatment technologies. However, my talk today will not be focused on technological aspects. It will be more general, more say, wide in terms of focus. And the keynote of the outline of the presentation is what you see in the slide. I will talk a little bit about water stress and water reuse in Europe. The relationship between Europe and Med countries, which is not always straightforward. Technological aspects of treated wastewater reuse. I will give some ideas of regulatory aspects which are not very easy to deal with. And then if there is time enough, I will show you a few case studies in this field. So mostly will be on water and wastewater, but I would like to start with some statements on soil. So desertification is strictly related to water availability and water stress. It was defined by UNCCD as deterioration of land due to both natural and human occurrences. Natural causes are mostly related to temperatures and environmental temperatures and water availability. So weather conditions, precipitations, and soil erosion related to these events. Human causes are mostly on groundwater overexploitation, irrigation. So you see the list of human causes is very much concentrated on water. There are very strong relations with water availability, water stress, and the water in the environment. As a result, when we talk about water stress, specifically in Europe, we have to look at the reasons, the causes of water shortage, and in Europe in general and in the Mediterranean region in particular. And these are very strongly related to lack of natural resources, which is natural and human-born, because it's related to overexploitation, rainfall, climate changes, population development and population increase, lack of proper water management, especially by agriculture, which is the strongest bulk user of water, and lack of protection from pollution. I will report, over my presentation, I will report several graphs and charts that I've found in several different reports, and this one is interesting. It is an index, a water stress index, which is the ratio between withdrawal and renewable resources, and it's been charted for the different European countries. And as you can see, I was surprised to see that Mediterranean countries are among those where water stress is strong, but there are continental European countries where water stress is very strong. For example, in Bulgaria, in Belgium, water stress is much stronger than, for instance, in Turkey or in Greece. So this was quite surprising to me, but there are evidences of this, and we will see this also in the following slides. These charts represent the situation in Europe. This is a report from JRC from 3 years ago. And on the left side, we see water availability over Europe. The blue areas are those where water availability is higher, and the yellowish, the orange areas are those where there is less water available. And as we can see, there are some coastal areas, especially in the south of Italy, in Spain and Greece, where there is strong water stress, but there are also some very large areas in the Balkans where there is a very strong water stress, and due to lack of available resources. And when we go to the right side of the slide, the chart represents water demand for all sectors, including agriculture, industry, livestock, and households. And what we see here is that there is some correspondence between demand and available water resources, but still what we can see is that demand is much stronger in in coastal areas, especially in Italian coastal areas, and there are concentration of water demand where large cities are. Going further on these charts, I found these two where we see that the lack of water for irrigation is represented on the left, and we see that there are areas of Europe where there is a strong lack of water for irrigation, insufficient water for irrigation of crops, and these are concentrated in the south of Italy, in the south of Spain, and in other areas in the eastern part, and also the lack of water for spontaneous vegetation growth. We have also a problem with this. Is very strongly shifted toward the Mediterranean area, as you see in this slide. Then, if this is the situation in Europe, we can have a look at the situation of water utilization, of water use, both conventional water resources and reclaimed water resources, saying water coming from reuse. On the right side, we have a graph of the use of natural water resources, conventional water resources in the different sectors. And if we include electricity generation, which is not, in my opinion, is not real use, water used for electricity generation can be, of course, reused afterwards. It's a cascade use. So it should not be included in this chart, in my opinion. Anyways, conventional water resources are mostly used for agriculture and electricity generation. Whereas when we look at the reclaimed water, secondary water, we see that 75% is used for irrigation, for agriculture. The situation of water use in Europe, this slide is very schematic. Of course, it doesn't cover all relevant European countries, and it doesn't cover all relevant activities. But just to have an idea, we can more or less split Mediterranean Europe, where there is a large majority of reuse projects dealing with agricultural reuse, meaning mostly irrigation, and Northern Europe, Central or Northern Europe, where most of the projects deal with ecological uses. When we say ecological uses, we also intend groundwater recharge and industrial uses of treated wastewater. Again, this is also not very updated because it's about 10 years ago, but these were the projects that were numbered about 10 years ago, the reuse projects. And again, we see that in Northern Europe we have a number of large projects on urban and environmental reuse of treated wastewater. And in coastal areas, we have more treated wastewater reuse applications for agriculture and irrigation. Yes. When we consider the relationship between between Europe and the Mediterranean, we have to consider that Mediterranean is not a part of Europe. Mediterranean is shared among 3 continents. We have about 21 countries facing the Mediterranean. Many of them are not European, and there is a very relevant share of population facing the Mediterranean, which is from Asia or from Africa. And we tend to neglect sometimes this aspect. We tend to consider Mediterranean as a part of Europe, and we lose this view that Mediterranean is really a common ground, this common area that we split with other continents. And when we see the uses of water across Mediterranean countries, sorry. Of course, we have a larger share of industrial and municipal uses in Europe, mostly in Europe, with concern of industrial uses, and a larger share of agricultural withdrawal that is related to Asia and Africa. In any case, we have also strong parts, municipal withdrawal and municipal use of water is very strong in all the three continents, because large cities face the sea, and coastal cities are those that have relevant water consumptions. When we look at the future, we see that the demographic trends until 2050, it is a little smaller. I don't know if you can read it, but demographic trend until 2050 is of a triplication of population. The blue line is the population increase forecast, demographic trend from 1950 to 2050. And we were 200 million inhabitants in 1950, and we will be probably 3 times this number, 600 million in 2050. Out of this, the contribution of South and Eastern Mediterranean countries is given by the red line. The contribution of European Mediterranean countries is given by the green line. So you can easily see that there will be a much larger contribution from Asia and Africa to the demographic trend, and this means that we will have different pressures on water resources from that side, and we will have to face this and to consider this in the future. And also, when we look at the GDP in MED countries, and this is related to 2009, we see that there is the lack of correspondence between population and GDP often. So we have small countries with high GDP and larger countries or highly populated countries with low GDP. So this also has to be taken into consideration in a holistic view of water resources management. When we see specifically the water stress in Mediterranean countries, considering Mediterranean, as I said before, not a part of Europe, but shared between the three continents, we see that the main factors affecting water stress are, first of all, population concentration, population shifts towards the coastline, and then, of course, seasonal water stress. Due to these aspects, tourism, so seasonal shift of population, agricultural requirements, uneven precipitation, so climate change basically, and overexploitation of natural resources. As you see, water stress is higher in southern Mediterranean and southern and eastern Mediterranean. But we can consider all the region affected by water stress all in all. Especially when we consider the aridity index, which is given by a ratio, which a ratio between the precipitation and temperature. We see that apparently situation is not dramatic in Europe as a whole. So we have some stress, some aridity, some places where there is we can consider arid, and some heavily stressed areas. But this is the annual average situation. When we go to the hot months of the year, we see that this aridity index increases a lot, and so we have that most of the Mediterranean coastal areas are heavily affected by water stress and can be considered affected by aridity. There are several possibilities for fighting water stress. Say, in very general terms, we can have three possible approaches, and one is transfer water from one side to the other, which means large infrastructures, which means canals, pipes, and engineering heavy costs. We have the alternative of non-conventional use of non-conventional water resources, and when I say non-conventional, I mean mainly these three categories: desalination of seawater or brackish water, rainwater harvesting, and treated wastewater use or cascade water use. This means that water can be used multiple times for different uses. So direct or indirect reuse. When we say indirect reuse, means replenishment of natural water resources and then use of resulting water, and soil aquifer treatment, managed aquifer recharge, and these types of approaches and technologies that are very effective, in my opinion, and very relevant. The third possible approach is improved water management by balancing water demand and water supply. So playing with the users, the bulk users, and modeling and creating policies of appropriate use of water resources. This is more, is not, of course, it's not a technological option, it's more management, and it's more an option from the management point of view and from the large-scale management of water resources. of course, Mediterranean is large, and there are different priorities with respect to water availability and water use. So we have zones with sufficient water available. We have zones where there are strong quality issues, and there are zones where there are quality and quantity issues. There is a general latitude-related criterion, so we normally see that the more we go north, the less there is the stress is due to different causes. So in the south we have more quantity issues and less quality requirements, and we go north and we have more quality requirements and less quantity issues. But it is not always like this, especially when we compare the available water resources, renewable water resources, and the rainfall distribution. We see that there is a strong relationship between these two aspects, but there are very relevant areas, as for instance the Nile area, where we have very low precipitation but not very high problems with water availability, which is an exception, of course. When we look at water use in Mediterranean area, I've reported this chart, which doesn't include all countries, of course, of the Mediterranean area. It's mostly European Mediterranean, but we see here is just to have an idea, and we see that there are the strongest water users, France, Italy, and Spain, where there is also strongest agricultural use, except in France, but I don't know this number, this figure, I don't trust it very much. It's too low in my opinion. Anyways, we have, this is all in million cubic meter per year. And we have this ratio in 2005, 10 years ago, we had this ratio of wastewater reuse, treated wastewater reuse, which was about 3.7% of the treated wastewater. And the forecast is that in 2025, we will have about 13% of treated wastewater reuse. Now, this is really hard to say because we are having a lot of improvements in water use policies all over the countries, and we are the water stress that we are facing is much more than expected in the last 10 years. So probably if policies are coherent with the needs, we will have more than this percentage. But this is also a matter of money, and so of available funding for these projects. In any case, when we look at treated wastewater reuse in Mediterranean countries, most of it is due to agriculture. So we know that agriculture takes about 65% of conventional water resources, and more than 80% when we consider southern and eastern Mediterranean countries. The opportunity of treated wastewater is to have an unexploited water resource, and then we have to consider the fertilization potential of treated wastewater, and we also have to consider that there are large areas of the Mediterranean or southern Mediterranean where raw wastewater is used for irrigation. So there is a high acceptability of this resource. While in Italy, in many European Mediterranean countries, we have to convince farmers to use treated wastewater because there is
lack of trust, there is lack of acceptability, there is a fear that the products will not be accepted by the market. This is not the case for Southern Mediterranean countries where normally there is more acceptability for these sources of water, especially considering the high technological level that has been reached by wastewater treatment. So difficulties in wastewater reuse projects
are mostly related to the complexity, perceived complexity. Normally, we can have also very easy and very simple wastewater treatments, but we still need some technical knowledge. Regulations are not always well fitted with the local situations. The financial capacity, as I said before, there is a problem of money. These projects are not easy to be funded. Of course, there is also a need of planning between supply and demand, because there is, of course, competition for different quality of the different resources. And then, of course, there is a need of monitoring procedure and analytical capacity, because these projects need to be monitored and continuous. So we have to be always aware of the quality of water that we are producing. Okay, there is also a problem of sanitation coverage in terms of sewage coverage, sewage networks, and very important public perception. So there is work to be done on stakeholder involvement, on public perception, on communication, on diffusion of results of research activities, and so on and so forth. In terms of technological aspects, 2 minutes? Okay, so I will be very quick on technological aspects. We have the risks and opportunities in terms of continuous water supply, primary sources, safeguard, and nutrient supply. These are the opportunities. You can read the risks. The real questions, the real doubts are always about money, costs, reliability of technologies, limits and regulation, and stakeholder involvement. These are the 4 main points that have to be tackled when dealing with the treated wastewater projects of treated wastewater reuse for irrigation. So, in terms of technological aspects, we can cover all the main parameters of concerns, which are mostly divided in 4 categories. The parameters of concerns are basically suspended solids, microorganisms, toxic compounds, and nutrients. And the concerns that these parameters cause are these that you can see. Hygienic safety is very relevant, and of course also accumulation of toxic compounds on soil and crops is very relevant. But fortunately, we have very effective technologies that can deal with all these aspects. So I will not list all of them, but these are in the books. So it's only a matter of appropriate applications of these technologies. Okay, I will skip a little bit on these. My specific area of work is on filtration application to wastewater treatment for reuse in agriculture. And so my group at IRSA deals with microfiltration, ultrafiltration, and both with membranes and non-conventional filtration tools. But I will not bore you with the advantages and possible disadvantages of filtration technologies. Well, this is the situation in terms of regulations. We have in Europe we depend on European regulation and European directives, and then these are converted into national laws and then again into regional laws. So we have to respect regional laws, but regional laws also depend on the higher levels, and this is very complicated to approach. There's been a lot of talk in Europe about a specific directive on wastewater reuse. There's a lot of talk still now. I'm participating in a couple of groups in Europe for defining quality standards for wastewater reuse, but there is no agreement whatsoever, and so there's a lot of discussion going on, and in the end we will not have a directive, but rather probably guidelines which are not a very soft way of saying things. Directive would be more strong. But in any case, we will see in the following months. Just very quickly, I would like to give you just an idea of the projects that are going on in. Well, I have just 4. We may have, I don't know, 400 wastewater treatment for reuse project in Europe, but I've taken 4 relevant ones. One is very well known. This is Tel Aviv, Shafdan. And it's a tertiary treatment. You see the volumes are this is a very large full-scale plant from Tel Aviv, and the effluents are sent to the groundwater table via infiltration basins, and then the water is recovered from the infiltration basins about 100 kilometers away. So it is exploited the filtration capacity and the storage capacity of the deep ground. Sabadell in Barcelona is similar, but in this case we have only secondary treatment at the moment. There is a plan to do tertiary treatment, but in this moment there is secondary treated wastewater which is discharged into a riverbed where it infiltrates and then is recovered downstream. This is a very, very nice project in Apulia. It is about 60 kilometers from here, where a full-scale wastewater treatment plant is equipped with a tertiary treatment, and then the effluent from the tertiary treatment is sent to agriculture and irrigation of olive trees and fruit trees and horticulture. Last one. In Cyprus, where there's also a strong problem of water availability, and here again there is a very interesting long-term project of treated wastewater reuse from the treatment plant. Last slide, I will leave you with a couple of concepts. Of course, there are different needs across continental Europe.